All right, let's kick it off. 121 people. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here from Poland, from all over the place, from Scotland, from Argentina, from Chile, from Australia, from Belgium, from Germany, Italy, Spain, South Africa, and England, I guess, as well, right? And the Netherlands. And I've probably missed a few. Thank you so much. We're going to be talking a little bit about standards in conversation design. And when we announced this, people were like, oh, there are no standards in conversation design. Some of these companies have published maybe a few guidelines. This is a way of doing it. This might work. Why don't you try this? But at CDI, particularly through CDI Foundation, we are more and more focused on creating standards where we can be more precise in saying this is how we should be doing things, because we know what good AI assistants look like. We know how they talk. We know that they drive value for the business and that they help people get things done the way they want it in a pleasant way. So we know what makes up a good AI assistant. And yeah, we always show this one. The movie Her, this is the holy grail in conversational AI in a way, right? It's, an assistant that is fully integrated, that can talk about anything, can do everything, is contextual, is personalized, is pleasant to interact with. That is kind of what we think about when we think about conversational AI. This is when, someone in a boardroom says, yes, we need a chatbot. They expect that you're going to create this overnight. That next day they show up and test it out. And then obviously they've got Samantha. I think her name's Samantha, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. I think her name's Samantha. So this is kind of what we always think, right? And yes, what it means is, conversational AI is complex. It's fun. It's interesting. It drives business value. It drives great experiences, but it's not easy to do. And so what we need to do is make it easier for people that create these assistants, that we give them the tools and the standards that helps them create human-centric and inclusive and empathetic, goal-driven AI assistants. And when we talk about AI assistants, we envision a world in which enterprises create one AI assistant that then interfaces with people via chatbots, via voice applications, but in the metaverse. So we don't like to think of them as isolated projects. Instead of deploying 20, 30 different conversational AI projects, why not create one good AI assistant and have that talk to people, whether they're employees or customers or patients or partners, via all these different channels. So that's what we do at CDI Foundation. That we develop the standards for these human-centric AI assistants, and we're a nonprofit organization that is dedicated to these standards that interface with people via chat, voice, and the metaverse. And the way we've organized this, because a lot of people know us, of course, as Conversation Design Institute. At CDI Foundation, we work with the entire industry, or as much as we can, to figure out what those standards are and figure out how we actually want to get organized, that we have consensus about what works, about what our goals are, the frameworks that we use. So we do that at CDI Foundation, figuring out how to do things and creating those standards. And then at Conversation Design Institute, that is why we actually teach you these standards, and we have certification programs. And then CDI Services that we talked about earlier, that's a consulting firm that will help you actually in a very clever way implement these standards in your enterprise if that's something that you're interested in. So CDI Foundation, that's also, a lot of people know Conversation Design Festival, are events that we've put on 3 times now already, that we always very much enjoy, and that seems to, people seem to enjoy that very much. That's also organized by CDI Foundation. So we have these amazing companies that are helping us do this work. So Microsoft is supporting CDI Foundation. Salesforce is doing that. Then we have Ultimate company in Berlin, very impressive. Human First that actually committed yesterday, and we had a great call, that will be driving a lot of the research that we do about training language models and figuring out what the best practices are. Cobus, very well known in the industry, has now joined Human First. So a lot of his work will also be accessible via CVI. Really cool. VoiceFlow, prototyping tool that I think a lot of you might be familiar with, or maybe you work with. But we're also working with universities, RMIT in Australia. Then we have Open Voice Network that's part of the Linux Foundation that we work with to figure out what these standards are. And Infobip, a company that's been with us for a very long time, that always puts on great talks at the festival, is also part of this foundation. So at the foundation, we figure out what the standards are. We organize the festival where we want to share the research, and we also have scholarship programs where we help people break into the industry. Because if AI is a reflection of the people that create it, we want to make sure that we have a good representation of society in the teams that are creating these experiences. So when we think about developing AI assistants, everybody thinks about that holy grail, right? But there are actually different levels at which an AI assistant can function. All right, so you kind of have the lower level, you start out as a baby and then you grow into maturity. What we try to do is better identify the different levels at which AI assistants live. So when you're starting out like a little baby, an AI assistant is harmless and kind. It can't really do anything, but it's nothing but potential. And this AI assistant wants to grow so that it can help other people grow. But then later on, it starts to develop its own personality, right? We have our own tone of voice. I start to understand the ways people speak. I can answer questions, and I can sometimes even help people get things done, right? And we see that a lot of times is where, we've got some FAQ stuff, and we have a few integrations and mission critical journeys. That's how a lot of chatbots start to evolve. But then every day we're getting smarter. Can help people with lots of stuff because I can now start looking things up. I have access to more databases. I enjoy talking, so there's small talk and chit chat. I can keep them engaged, and I make it much easier for people to accomplish their goals. So again, the scope increases. I'm more integrated, and my experience, the level of experience goes up, and I become more interesting to interact with for people. And then as I grow, I become more integrated as a being. I build relationships and I recognize people. I live on multiple channels. I make use of supporting systems. And I have a team of people that's helping me perform to the best of my ability, right? As this assistant grows into the enterprise, the team that is building it also starts to grow, right? And you start bringing in more designers and AI trainers and supporting engineers and smarter product managers, and you develop a conversational culture within an organization, so you got more use cases. You just start adding to scope, and it's really cool. And then eventually, and this is when we sort of have our Samantha, her kind of experience where it is a delightful experience. I can talk about almost everything and help people with almost everything. People reach out to me first because they know that I get the job done. I build relationships with people. I get better every day. I provide experiences, and my team keeps improving me and lets me play around with the latest technologies. Because that's kind of when you get to that level, you're not done, because technology evolves. There's a lot of research. People are building amazing stuff. So at the enterprise, you're always looking at, what's out there, what kind of, what's our long-term AI roadmap? What kind of technology do we need to deliver on that? What does the team structure need to look like? So this is kind of where it really becomes fun and mature to start working on that stuff. So as this assistant grows up, it's really hard, and it's a journey. And you can't do these things overnight, right? So you sort of see these different altitudes of development of an AI assistant. And what it really means, if you look at these descriptions, and we've used these words quite a bit already, is that eventually we want to have lots of scope and we want to deliver a delightful experience. But as you start out, you cannot deploy that just overnight. So it often starts out with a simpler chatbot or a voice application. And the level of experience is just, it's functional, the fundamentals are there. But then conversations become you add more to scope, so you have more competing intent. So AI training becomes a bit more complex. Conversations get longer, so I need to think more about how I build trust with people, right? If I start asking them for credit card details, I need to be able to create an environment in which people feel safe, right? Because our applications need to be secure, but it's just as important for people to feel safe. So as I start adding to scope, I need to start adding to my level of experience. And the more conversations you have, the better they should be. So start small. As you start adding to scope, you're going to start adding to experience to eventually get to that top right corner. And yeah, if you find any consultant in the world and you ask them, where do I need to go? They'll say top right corner. So it's kind of a no-brainer. So we created this model for it. And what we're thinking about more and more is when we interact with clients as well. It's like, if we look at scope and experience, the chatbot that you currently have or your IVR system or whatever it is, you're trying to build, where does it sit? And a lot of times you'll find companies here that, they've built for scope, they've got integrations, they put the stuff in, but they don't really get the value because they've not thought about, conversation design enough, or maybe they thought about it, but they didn't know how to implement the standards, because there are proper ways of doing things. And that's kind of what we're talking about today. So if we want to start driving experience, this is the CDI workflow. A lot of you will know this, in the basics, before you create anything, mentalize the context of the conversation, have the conversation, make it inclusive, and optimize it for behavior. And once you have that, you start training the model, you start thinking about the long tail. And in our new course, we have some updates on this, but soon we'll have a nicer, better polished version of this, because, we have a lot, we're also putting in a lot of hours working with clients, so we know how to do things a little better. So there'll be some changes here, but overall, to drive experience, this is the kind of the model that you want to use. And if we then start looking at those different altitudes of development again of an AI system, we can kind of look at what are some of the standards and patterns that we want to add to these assistants to make sure that we deliver value of what we're trying to achieve at that given moment, but that we also set ourselves up for the next step, right? So boom, here's a lot already, and then we'll add some of the AI training parts, and I'll have a chat with Willem about that as well. So at that bottom level where we don't have anything yet, but it's kind of when you start the project and the project is founded, what are the values that you want to lock in, right? Because AI builds upon AI, upon AI, upon AI. So if I, do wrong things at the beginning of a project, it stays in there. It stays in that chatbot, and it's going to feed off it, etc. So what do I want it to be? And I think the founding principles, the goal for everybody should be to be inclusive, human-centric, empathetic, and goal-driven as an AI assistant, right? So being inclusive is, I want to make sure that I speak to people in a way that, that they all understand what I'm saying, that they don't feel offended, and it's a pleasant experience, but also that I respect people's linguistic preferences. So some people might not, be as eloquent as others, but sometimes we also have different ways of phrasing things or words that we use based on our culture and on our personality, etc. So we want to be inclusive. We want to be human-centric, because it's about the person and it's not about the chatbot. We often see a lot of chatbots that are very much written from the company's perspective or from the chatbot's perspective, rather than making it about the customer, the patient, the employee, the partner, whoever it is interacting with. And having empathy, having empathy for the situation, making sure that we understand what's happening and that we're respectful in that regard, and that they're goal driven, because at the end of the day, we are driving value for both customers and for the organization. So I think once you're starting out, these are kind of like your fundamental principles, and you need to have those locked in from day one, and they will influence, who you're going to add to the team, and the things that you're going to value and the things that are going to be important. And you want to have a long-term perspective on this, right? Don't think about creating something for the people of today, just today. No, think about all the people in all time and then do the right thing. So that's kind of before we've built anything. But then when we go to that first level where, we have our FAQs, we've got a few integrations, what are some of the things that we want to do there? Kind of all the fundamental copywriting techniques that are part of conversation design, right? So acknowledgement, confirmation, prompt. So we call that the conversational mantra. So these are really my, acknowledgement, I hear you, confirmation, I understand you, the prompt, this is what we're going to do next. When messages are longer, we want to start using discourse markers so it makes it easier for people to understand what it is we're saying, right? First of all, second of all, firstly, lastly, however, all those things are discourse markers that kind of help people navigate through the messages that you're giving them. They're like breadcrumbs on a website, right? Almost helping people with comprehending that information that you're sharing. So I want to use active language because it makes it easier for people to understand. So we want to use simple language. Sometimes we still see chatbots that just use, well, there's two sides. Sometimes the writer just wants to show how many words they know, very bad habit. And sometimes the writer has just been brainwashed by corporate speak, and it shines through the chatbot, and it's just not very simple anymore, right? So if you got language, you got A1, A2, B1, B2, and then you get into the more complexity. You don't want to go beyond B2 in most cases, unless you're creating a chatbot for a lawyer, maybe, but which they exist. And never a dead-end street, right? When there's a conversation, never just have it stop. Bridge it to a new conversation, or hand people off to a different source, maybe to a website or to an agent when you're stuck. And think about repair. And for us, I think, repair is not just like, hey, can you try again? Hey, try again, didn't really get that, try again, and then piss off. That's not really what repair is. We would like to see, more people actually use escalating detail in repair. Maybe not for every journey, but in mission critical journeys where, let's say you're 4 or 5 turns into a conversation and you're doing a transaction. If you now lose someone, you want to be able to work really hard to get them back in through repair, right? And repair is always sometimes a little tricky for people, but I always compare it to if I walk into a building and the person says like, hey, good morning, how can I help you? And I say something that doesn't make sense, or I don't say anything at all. They're like, hey, how can I help you? Are you here to see someone? And then I still can't figure it out. Are you here to see someone? Do you want to use the restroom? Or when people do not understand each other, we just start adding more information. We start adding more detail to make it easier for the other person to get back on track in the conversation. So with escalating detail in repair, that's kind of what you're doing. So I think they're very much part of like fundamental conversation design standards. And now, once I have that and I have these things written in, I'm off the ground. I got support from my stakeholders. There's more budget. We're going to focus more on quality because first, it's all most metrics in the beginning. It's quantitative. We want to just reduce cost. We want to contain people. It's all very mechanical. But once you cover that, it's time to go into the qualitative metrics. You start thinking more about NPS, about customer experience. So persona and tone of voice and trust really become more and more important. Right? So I want to start thinking more about having a detailed persona. So at the fundamental level, I'll have some guidelines, but now I really start stepping it up and I need to have that documented, and this persona needs to be consistent and shine through every conversation, right? So we don't want to have any consistent language because it might create bad experiences. If I'm initially doing a Q&A chatbot and the answer isn't really perfect, spot on, maybe the language is a little off, they still have seen everything they need to see. So the risk of them abandoning, it doesn't harm us that much. But once we go into multi-turn, we don't want to do anything to lose customers. So that consistency becomes more important. Personality content becomes more important because people might get stuck, they might get bored, they might need some relief. So maybe some light entertainment that helps people become more forgiving when the chatbot fails is going to be very helpful. but also adding to scope and onboarding content, like how do I make use of this assistant? How does this work? But also explainability. How do you get to these answers? What are you doing with my data? How does that work? What does your security look like? So at this level, you want to start adding those kind of standards. So what you already see, there are standards in terms of design patterns. There are like linguistic patterns of active language and those sort of things. But there are also standards and best practices in terms of scope. But at a certain level, you just need to have those things organized, right? And then when things really become personal and they become contextual, and we're really going to start unlocking value of conversational AI, we're going to start looking at driving behavior, right? So we're already doing that a little bit, but now stuff gets more complex. It becomes more important that we really find ways of guiding people through their journeys. So BJ Fogg is a model that we use in our design courses, where we look at stimulating behavior by focusing on ability, motivation, and prompts. It pretty much says when people are very motivated, it can be a little harder for them to do things. And when they're not so motivated, we need to make it very easy for them, right? And you always want to work with those three things. There needs to be a prompt that somebody wants to do something. They need to be motivated, and they need to have the ability. And we have lots of copywriting techniques for that. But I think at that level, it just becomes important that you have people on your team that understand these things and that can apply this. So you've got the BJ Fogg model from the Stanford Behavioral Institute, and then there's the Cialdini with his principles from the famous books Influence and Persuasion and Persuasion. And he's written a bunch of other things, but there are fundamental principles like reciprocity, commitment, social proof, authority, liking, and scarcities. And these are techniques that you can use in AI assistants. But yeah, once you start your chatbot, you got two people from customer service just creating an AI experience. You cannot expect them to write this in. This is very advanced copywriting stuff, right? So also, if you think about Kahneman thinking, fast and slow, system 1 and system 2, like how do you play with those things, right? So reciprocity means that when you are given something, you're very likely to give back, right? So often you have monks on the streets, right? And they give you a rose or they give you something, and they put it in your hand. They just really give it to you, and they look at you, and once you accept it, they'll ask for a donation. And psychologically, you cannot say no to that anymore because you have been given something. So you want to reciprocate and give something back. And these monks make millions per year. So reciprocity is a principle that I can use to influence people and motivate them. Or once they are committed, they can stick with that commitment. Or social proof, when more people like me are doing specific behavior, I find it easier for me to do the same thing. Scarcity is one that we see. Only so many left in stock, or decide now, deadline is tomorrow, whatever. So if you're starting to think about, really driving sales through AI assistants, these are the patterns, the psychological patterns that we want to use, right? So like we said, we've got sort of grounding principles around inclusivity, human centricity, empathy. Then we have design patterns, we've got linguistic patterns, we've got standards around scope, and then it becomes about behavior. And eventually in turquoise, the highest level of these AI assistants, the experiences become much higher in fidelity, right? So we start thinking more about what does it look like in voice. We will have custom voices, we'll have sonic design and audio landscaping, and we'll create virtual beings. But all of that stuff isn't, it's expensive to invest in. It's getting cheaper, of course, but putting that in on day one, when you're doing a simple FAQ bot, you're not really getting the value. You're just creating like a nice gimmicky experience. It's better to just really focus on those underlying patterns and standards, and then build on top of that, and build on top of that, and build on top of that. So that's when we say the more conversations you have, the better they should be. At each stage, you want to start applying more of these patterns. And also, and that's why Willem is on the call here. thank you for Willem was actually booked for a different thing, and I was like, no man, you got to come on. And he's like, all right, because I got some questions on AI training and that people had sent in, and they were like, what do these standards look like for AI training? What are some of the things that we want to be doing? Maybe Willem, you can share a few things about kind of how you see that grow at enterprises, sort of at the lowest level, what people are doing, and how does that work, that scope of work evolve over time?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me on, Hans. And amazed with all the different questions that were also sent in.
Yeah, I'll take a few minutes to go through the chat here. Yeah.
Yeah, I see Emma Sophia and Pasa Koren also putting some good questions in there. Maybe I'll say something and address Emma Sophia's question from my end, and maybe Hans, you want to add to that from what you're seeing.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and I also see Alex from Human First joined us. Thank you for being here as well. And he also had a look at it. But go for it. Willem. Take your time. This is your NLU design moment.
So, I mean, these AI assistants, right? There's a lot has to go right for it to become a delightful experience. They have to be accessible. They have to understand you. They have to then get back to you with a relevant answer, but also an answer that evokes persona. So there's a lot of change in this link that all have to work. And that's one of the reasons I think why Hans is thinking about this thing in terms of altitudes. You know, your weakest link, you fix that, and once that you fix that, suddenly that's your strongest link, and then you suddenly have to go back to these other ones, and that's how you sort of climb this stairway to having a truly delightful bot. And you know, whether it's the conversation design or the UX of the voice or chat or whatever modality you're using. Same goes for the AI training part. So getting better and better at understanding what the human is saying to the bot. So we've looked at a couple of main things that you need to sort of get in place at each altitude. So if we go up the list, if we start at the bottom, be inclusive in your data sourcing. You know, if I train an AI assistant, it will be very good at understanding people that are just like me. It will not necessarily be good at understanding people that are not like me. So try to get a big group together when you're sourcing the data that trains your AI assistant, and use the proper validation techniques to also make sure that, hey, now we've got a diverse group training this bot, but you know, it's the audience is still talking in other ways to this bot, and the bot doesn't understand, or it, you know, inadvertently is understanding one small subset of the audience that, you know, gets a great experience, and the rest are left out in the cold. So that's a basic. Then comes your training phrase discipline. So we have a bunch of guidelines, and these are, it's great to see that across the industry that people are coming together around these guidelines. You know, things like, for the average vendor, the average platform, have 10 utterances per intent, right? And again, that's not a hard rule. That's a guideline. You know, even distribution of utterances across your intents, this kind of thing. Once, and you know, it's easy to say these rules. It's a little less easy to make sure that also is the case for your bot. And even I slip up sometimes, and I found out, hey, I've been live with this bot, and one of this or the other intent has a duplicate training phrase. So that's bad. Yeah, sure. And then what we have next step is recurrent cross-validation testing. So we have a couple of different ways to test the accuracy of your bot, which, you know, at some point you really just need to do that. You can't rely on the human AI trainer in this case to get it right. Because the scale of the bot and the complexity of the bot gets so big that you as the human cannot sort of wing it without having these cross-validation techniques to check your work. Then we get, you know, to round this off, we get, you know, parent-child skills intent hierarchies. We get into the more higher idea of an NLU architecture. So how do we have different levels at which your AI assistant understands the incoming question? You know, it could be like a main topic of an incoming question or response, then a subtopic, then maybe an action within that topic, maybe certain entities, certain keywords. You need to build this architecture out if you want to really truly understand what it is exactly that someone is talking about in that moment. And finally, data-driven intent scoping. This can help you in not just creating these intents or looking at your audience from a business perspective, saying, well, this is what we want to talk about, so this is the intents we'll create. No, you want to be able to respond to what the actual human is asking, not what you as a business think they ought to be asking.
Yeah. It's kind of a nice fundamental thing of human centricity in a way as well. It's like, no, like, what do they want to know rather than what is it we want to talk about? Yeah. And we had a few of the questions in it. I shared them with you. Maybe you can talk about that a little bit, because it is also about, how many intents should I have? And they're very, generic questions, but I think kind of you describe, I think, kind of the model of the different activities that you're going to have, but maybe you can add some numbers to it or reflect on it a little more.
Yeah, sure. Let me pull those up. So let's see. We've got one of the people joining in had a question.
Oh, we have Alan on the call.
Right. We have someone, Subu Venkata Raman. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Thank you for your question. So you were asking, you were saying you work for a large bank in Canada, or the largest. And I know that there are some other people in the call that work in the financial industry working on AI assistants. So I'm sure their ears are picking up now. You're asking me, or you're asking us, how many intents should a chatbot have? And there is no one answer. Generally, as you go up in altitude, the number of intents will increase somewhat, but it will not necessarily double at each step or grow 10x at each step. But let me answer it in this way. When you're just starting out and you're just getting your first bot out there, just try to create 20 intents. And that could be, for instance, the main questions you expect, maybe some small talk that you can expect. Just start with 20 intents. If it's less than 20, then it can still work, but maybe by then, maybe you should just have some business rules and maybe not use conversational AI to understand the incoming questions. But anyway, so start with 20, I would say. And then there are bots out there. It's not uncommon for AI assistants to now have 200 to 1,000 intents. But when you get to that point, obviously the complexity gets that big that you need to have an entire set of tools, workflows, and expertise around that. So yeah, I hope that this answer was in any way helpful. I'm sure there are people in the chat that can also give their own.
Alex is also saying, it's like you got to have the number of intents that you need to provide the right level of automation and coverage. Right? So you got to look at your historical data. This kind of like the data-driven intent scoping, and Raz also has a perspective on learning very much about that. Maybe we can have Alan on a session next time. That would also be fun.
Yeah.
I see a few other questions. I mean, we have a few more slides. I think we're going to run over, and I don't mind at all, but it's kind of fun here. So it's one question that I saw that I picked up real quick. Why are we talking about standards and not patterns? And this is, this is the kind of the work that we do, and this is not a final thing. This is what in the foundation, what we're trying to create as a model. So like I say, some of these things are design patterns or are linguistic patterns. Some of them might be best practices. What we're creating is a framework that allows us to talk about these things. And everyone that has an opinion on it, particularly if you do not agree with stuff, join and be part of it. And I think that's kind of what we're trying to create here. Also, another question around voice and chat, and they're very different. And so our perspective is always that you should create stuff voice first. just figure out what it, in voice, you only have words. You only have words to communicate with. And as soon as you're off track, people drop out because they don't really know how to continue the conversation. Whereas in chat, you can always, still read what the chatbot just said, right? Or there's a picture that kind of helps with the navigation. But voice is the most complex. So if you can figure it out in voice, then you can adjust that design for the other channels as well. So we advocate creating a voice first AI assistant and then make the adjustments for all the different channels. And some of the channels are richer in experience than others, and others are just boom words. If you do it voice first, it goes to SMS, it goes to WhatsApp, it goes to chat, but there will always be these variations. There's another one. It's like, how do I convince my organization that they should be doing this? That they should be thinking about this stuff? And that's a great question. What you'll see is a lot of companies, they will invest in conversational AI technology, but they do not get the value. And the reason for that is often that they do not understand the complexity of it, right? They're not really committed. So that's why we say, when you start out, don't break the bank on all these experiences. Just write the fundamentals, create a good experience, create a good POC, advocate for that, build a culture around it, and then you get internal adoption for these projects, and you get more budget, and people will buy in. And it's a campaign that doesn't it doesn't happen overnight to get that stuff in there. And we have we'll talk. I'll get back to that a little later. Well, it's difficult to keep an eye on the chats. Too many people. I feel like a Twitch streamer. So we kind of talked about, these kind of experience standards, patterns for the experience side. If you look at scope, what are some of the drivers of scope? And in a way, what drives scope? It's tech. It's just how much can we handle? How many channels do we have? Do we want to add to more languages? And then there are the types of conversations that we have. Starts to rain really loud here. I don't know if you can still hear me. But kind of if you think about use cases and scope, AI assistants, they are internal facing, they are external facing. So you can talk to customers or employees or patients, can be anything. And then you're always looking at, automating existing conversations. So I might be having conversations in support. So I can automate those and get value there. But then there are also conversations that I could be having, right? So sometimes there's just friction in customer journeys where actually conversational AI would provide a lot of value, and maybe we should create an experience for that, right? So we have the internal, we got the external, we got existing conversations, and we got possible conversations. Then we have our chat channels, and we have our voice channels. And I think so. I always like when I see a use case, I kind of take this model and be like, oh wait, actually they're doing an internal with the possible conversation for a chat channel or a way around. So you can always kind of find all these use cases there. But yeah, use cases and your tech stack, they drive scope, and then CDI workflow and kind of the patterns and standards that we talked about, they drive the experience. And scope plus experience is business value. That's kind of how we like to talk about that. And of course, as we know, it takes a village to raise an AI assistant. And I saw one of those things there in the chat just now. How do I convince people, or how do I go from, like, if I have 2 people in customer service right now creating an FAQ chatbot, and how do I get to a department that is actually being able to deliver on all of this, and how does that grow? And for us, we always look at it as 4 quadrants that are in play, right? Well, we say you've got the mindset, so that is how people, individuals perceive the work that they're doing, the skill set that they have, the ability that they have to do the work. But the culture, and this keeps coming up today a little bit, is the context in which people do the work. So what's the underlying strategy? What's the stakeholder buy-in? What kind of KPIs? What kind of budgets are there? What is the environment really that we do this in? And then what are the tools and the structure with which we do the work? Mindset, skill set, culture, and systems. And what's interesting here, oh, I forgot about this one. So when we think about mindset, maybe a lot of you have actually seen that we started a research program while we're giving a lot of people a personality test to figure out, what are the types of people that do well in conversational AI, whether it's for AI training, whether it's for design, consulting roles. So what can we tell about this kinds of people? And then how can we help organizations find these people internally to then build up these departments that can deliver this work? So we have these assessments for that. And then for the skill set, that's obviously where you have your CDI certification programs, right? In order to create these assistants, we want to have designers, we want to have AI trainers, we want to have engineers that can do the work, that know how to work with human first and Rasa and put that all together to create good experiences on all these different channels. And what you will find is that when we talk about these altitudes of development for these AI assistants, they play in all quadrants. So as I'm just starting out, what I want is a few stakeholders to be there and say, you know, you guys, you go build that chatbot. And these people can do that freely without risking their careers. And they just hack it together. And, you know, they just use maybe some free software and just create a chatbot or like some simple chatbot. The software doesn't have to be very advanced. But then, you know, once they reach that first level and they're getting value, that's where you need, you know, develop more conversational culture in your organization. You get more budgets, you get a better, you start developing a full strategy. The mindset, you know, changes while we go from adventurous pioneers, we take a bit more responsibility because, you know, we're now having contextual conversations. The design levels become, you know, more advanced, and we want to start thinking about persona, we start thinking about behavior design, and the technology gets more advanced as well, right? Where maybe initially when I had that first chatbot, you know, I just put in the intents and added some training phrases. But now, you know, I get more volume. I start adding to scopes. I have more intents. I have overlapping training phrases. I call my friends at Human First to make sure that I organize all of that, right? At one point, maybe I started with Rasa open source, and I want to start leveling up now. So I'm going to go with, you know, call Alan for a contract and start maturing my tech stack, right? And I got more organized there, start adding more channels. So as you're working on these projects, you're always working with these four quadrants in a way, and you're already doing that, but you're not aware of it. So sometimes, you know, a project kind of tanks because we're very overdeveloped in the systems. We have very advanced technology, but our skill set's just not at that level yet. Right? So in technology, maybe we're building for turquoise, but we're still at purple with our skill set. And that's why our culture is kind of crumbling, because they're like, yeah, we invested all this money, but we're not getting value. So what's going on here, right? So these people are kind of off their path to that top right corner in that initial chart, right? So if we want to get to her, if we want to build a Samantha, there are these different altitudes of development, and there are design patterns and ways of doing things that you can implement at given moments to sort of mature. And yeah, not all of this is super quantifiable, of course, but at CDI Foundation, what we're doing is really working with the community to make it more quantifiable, to have a framework that allows us to have these conversations and kind of define that North Star and creating a path of getting there when we focus on mindset, skill set, culture, and systems. Let's see. Yeah. So for people that were here today on the call, and there are a lot of you, did we lose 122? I don't know how many we started with. Did we lose anyone? I think we did pretty okay. You can join us. So there are ways of joining. If you're with an enterprise, if you're with a university, if you're with a technology company, reach out and see how you can contribute, right? So maybe you have some thoughts about stuff that we should put in this model that should be part of it, or stuff that we can maybe frame better, or things you just want to fight with us, that's also okay. But join, and also if you're independent, you have your thoughts, join and be part of it. We very much welcome you. So please do that. And then, yeah, I made it to the end. So that's me with short hair. I'll go back to this one. Let's see if there are, yeah, I have a new picture. I just never taken time to upload it. But if you go to my Twitter, you can see a new picture. That's my way of getting Twitter followers. So I see Alex very involved here with everyone, doing some chats. So thank you. I saw Alan answering a few things. There's too much to kind of get started. Have you been keeping an eye? I saw you were typing too, Willem. Maybe there's some stuff that you want to highlight that you've.
I'd love to. I'm going to copy the entire list and see, if there's any relevant insights that I have, I'd love to just send out emails to those people that ask questions.
Yeah, yeah. But is there a topic that you pick up that we can maybe chat about a little bit
Oh
here
yeah, we've
now?
got 10
So
minutes
yeah,
left.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
exactly. Or we have an hour left, whatever we want can do. We're in charge. They're not gonna kick us out. Let's see. Yeah, the intent taxonomy. Brilliant. How do you usually do that, Willem? When you, because a lot of times enterprises call us, and there's already so much happening, and then we're actually, intent taxonomy. How do you usually see that be happening, and
It's
how's it
usually a
going?
big mess. It's usually a collection of Excel sheets that you can still, I mean, it doesn't have to be a mess, but it requires a lot of discipline on the side of your team to really do that well. And that's one of the nice things about Human First is sort of, it's harder to create that mess when you're running all these incoming user questions, which of those user questions then you label as a training phrase.
Yeah.
Yes, Alex, just take it easy. I'm just giving. Yeah, Excel in effect, Excel is a great tool, but it puts the onus on the human to be very diligent and keep everything in order, and in your day-to-day work that can be a challenge. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And a lot of this, I guess, a lot of this also happens with like these projects start out, and it's very, it's simple to keep the overview. Then it just ramps up much faster for people to keep up with skill set, but also with the workflow and the process around it, and bringing in the right tools. And then usually when you have these problems, it's never too late, but it's just cost twice as much effort to then get reorganized with these things. But then kind of one of the questions I had earlier, how do we convince people and show people that this is kind of what's happening in all these projects, and that therefore we already need to be strategic and kind of anticipate what's ahead of us. And I think these frameworks, as as we sort of grow this narrative, will help with that as well. Where if we get more enterprises, more tech companies involved with this, then you will be able to tell your boss, okay, I hear what you're saying, you want to do this, but now let's kind of look at this model. This is what we can expect. So let's start working on these things properly and make sure that we cover all 4 quadrants and do a good job there, that we find the right people with the right attitude, that we skill them up to the level that they can actually deliver. Let's give them an environment, a strategy, and a budget, and supervision, and the tools and technology that allows them to do the work. And once we start communicating like that as an industry, I think everybody's life's going to get just a little bit better.
Agreed. And I like the last comment, Alan. Totally there with you.
What's Alan saying? Another common banana peel is to use cross-validation on your training data as your only annual year evaluation metric. You can end up in a situation where it looks like you're making your model better, but you're actually making it worse. All right. The tools we create are too powerful often for the people that are using them.
Yeah,
But
and what he's for those people that maybe are not completely following with all the jargon happening sometimes in the chat, it basically, Alan, I think I'm summarizing well to say that if you're testing your bot using data that you yourself have created, then at some point it's gonna be very good at responding to exactly your test data, but not at how the audience is, how the audience of the bot is talking. And that changes over time as well, right? How people are talking to your bot this quarter is slightly different from last quarter. They have different things they're worried about, or they want to know about. They have different ways of talking.
Yeah. But it's also sometimes we might even like naively interpret what we're reading in the data so that we can just tell a good story to her boss, who's maybe not always as educated as they should be for running a conversational AI project as well. But sometimes they're very laser focused on accomplishing one kind of delivering on one KPI, but sometimes that might not be the right KPI, and it's very difficult to have the conversation about it because it's so, it's still new territory for everybody, and you just don't have the language to have that discussion. So you kind of read the data that, you might be wrong, you should be looking at other stuff, you're just, head in the sands and just reporting the good weather.
So maybe it's I have like a very high level question that was sent to us. Maybe that's a fun one to end it on.
Yeah.
So someone by the last name of, wait, is that anyway? Let me just put the question up there. So the question is, where do we currently stand in NLU, and how long is it going to take for machines to understand human emotions? So I'm sure that Hans also has some ideas about that, but I mean, it was standing at the beginning, right? Hans just mentioned something to that effect. We only just started out making, getting value from this new technology. And the interesting thing is that visual or AI running on visual data is actually already quite good at reading humans' faces and getting the emotion from humans' faces. So apparently, these poker play, it can already beat poker players at their game, because you can just see even these professional poker players cannot hide whether or not they have a good hand. However, on the NLU side, we are, I think, as an industry, we still have a long way to go to understand, when is something genuinely positive, when is something as a sarcasm. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know Ali used to always talk about getting rid of intense. We're always talking intense, still the word, but yeah, there's a lot that's still happening there. Yeah, reading emotions, like I think it is difficult. Like I just read the book What We Owe the Future. I recommend everybody reading that, but it's about long-termism and thinking about how AI will develop over time. And it's, AI is a reflection of the people that create it. What kind of values do we want it to build on? And rather than, recognizing emotion and then, because they're recognizing manipulating emotion, they're all philosophically interesting topics to talk about. But yeah, I found that a very interesting read, to think about, not just, AI in the next 2 years, next 5 years, next 10 years. No, AI for the rest of years. Do not think about the people at any given time. Think about all the people in all time. And then, if you're thinking about that, how do you then build your models today? We said we were going to end with that, but I actually see there's the What We Owe the Future is the book. I see a few people actually put the questions very correctly in the Q&A option of Zoom. So I will address those very quickly, because I think that's a very proper way of doing things, and that deserves to be answered. What are your thoughts on conversation design for kids? Glad you asked. We have the conversation design school for kids. It's a program that we have developed in Australia. School for Conversation Design, it's called, and we are actually it's a K-12 program, and it's really a lot of fun to have people already interact with it. It's a lot about how do you conversational AI in games and in the metaverse, and really showing them that there's a career there. So that's a really nice project that we're working on. What are our thoughts on integrating LLM and GPT-3? Yes, that's a different call. But overall, do not if you're a publicly listed company, do not have GPT-3 talk to your customers without supervision. But there are use cases where they can be very helpful.
And I was just going to type the name of one of our colleagues who has some more thoughts on that.
10 years forward, just give practical scenarios of where conversational bots will be used. Everywhere. Gartner always says, we'll talk more to bots than to people. I don't know if that's the case, but I think, everywhere that you go, everything that you say and do at one point has been influenced by AI. A lot of our thoughts come from YouTube videos that have been recommended to us by AI. The stuff we see on Instagram has been influenced by AI. So chatbots, conversational AI, Yeah, it'll be everywhere. It'll be supporting stuff. It'll be interacting with us. But I think overall, the how we are infused with AI and the illusion that we are thinking, it's just gonna be influenced by AI all the time. See, that's kind of that's also an interesting question. How do I convince customers from a voice bot to a chat bot? Yeah, use cases, ROI, show them, use this model. Got to do what you got to do. And then what is Open Voice Network? That's a nice question. I will leave you with that. Open Voice Network is looking at creating standards, technical standards mainly for voice, right? And they're part of the Linux Foundation. John Stein runs it. It's a lot of fun. We organize a boot camp with them next week or the week after in Washington, D.C. at Voice Conference. So they think about, protocols around interoperability, about security, IDs, and those sort of things. So they're looking at technical standards, and then from CDI's perspective, we'll look at, what are the experience standards that we want to have around those protocols that they're developing there. And with that, we will leave you. We still have 83 people. We lost 40. Do we have any book recommendations? Yes, War and Peace. I very much enjoy that. It's a long one. In Search of Lost Time is one of my favorites. Marcel Proust. Overall, I really like That's Not What I Meant by Deborah Tannen. Oh, you're blurring. Well, which one is it?
Yeah, I'm trying. No, it's just okay. I'll pretend it's a face. Yes, then it won't blur.
The Art of Statistics.
Great book.
Yeah, that's not what I meant. I really like. It's about conversational style, how people speak differently. So in the US, on the West Coast, people speak a little slower and other people finish their sentences. Whereas in the East Coast, New York, people like to interrupt each other and talk over each other. And these are kind of like different conversational styles. And sometimes we might be offended about how the other person speaks, but actually they just have a different conversational style. So I always really like that book. I don't know, I don't have much here. I'm also writing a book, but I'm always busy doing other stuff. But if you want to publish books, shoot me an email. It's about making AI speak human. Yeah, 75 people. Feels like we should get going. Hey, Anna. Yeah, no, book list, there's more. Shoot me an email. I'll have some, but I'm kind of blanking here. No, thank you so much. And thank you, Willem, from Conversation CDI Services with offices in Austin, Texas, and Amsterdam. Thank you for joining me on the call. For everybody, I do really mean, if you have opinions, if you want to be part of the foundation, if you want to share in what we're doing here, and please reach out and join us. It's really cool. And particularly let me know when you don't agree with the stuff we say. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hans. What are you gonna have for dinner today?
So I don't know. We have friends over, or one friend. And I kind of hope that I get home and then that problem is handled. But yesterday I made quinoa, kidney beans, green beans, broccoli, and tempeh. What are you having for dinner?
Pasta carbonara, spaghetti carbonara. Yeah, it's a classic.
It's a classic.
But Dutch style, right? Not the good Italian style. Dutch style carbonara.
Open up the thing. Al dente.
Yeah.
That's the only Italian Dutch people know. Al dente.
That's the only Italian part of it.
Yeah. Is anyone going to DC? Let us know, and I will see you there. And we also have another conference. We're doing a hackathon in November, and we're doing a conference in January. And then we're thinking about doing a conference in like a real one, where I can see people and touch them, in San Francisco in June. So that might be fun as well.
Cool. I didn't know.
One of it. one of the coolest conferences I was ever at was the Raza L3 conference in San Francisco. Very nice location. Met a lot of great people there.
Oh, tell us more about that hackathon, though. That happens, what, this November?
Yes, that is this November with one of our partners that is interested in showing that and have some very cool features. So we're not sure what the entire program looks like, but yeah, it'd be like a few talks, intro, give people an assignment, take some time to build stuff, demo day, and the best one gets to go on a date with Willem and his girlfriend.
Yes.
We are losing people. It's time to stop. Okay. Thank you, Willem. We'll check in. I'll give you a call. Thank you, everybody. Right. Have a lovely day. The recordings will be available in a cinema near you soon.